Hello, everybody, and thank you once again for joining me. Thank you for your patience with me. As I have explained, sometimes because I work from home and I work on the phone, it's a little hard to get things to coincide with this 5 p.m. Pacific deadline. So thank you for understanding and being flexible alongside me. It means a lot. And I'm just pleased to be here. Pleased to be here to have a little time with you. I'm going to wait for some people to join. What can I do to pass some time? I can say, yes, it's hotter than Hades here in Los Angeles right now. It's supposed to be cooling off, and I'll be darned if it isn't heating up again. And there's been some tropical storms. I think around Mexico, that area, it's been bringing a lot of just sweltering humidity up here. It's been awful, and I've been sweating a lot. Hey, Renee, thank you. You're the first person to join. As I was saying, I was going to talk for just a few minutes to wait for some people to join aboard. I certainly hate to make conversation about weather, but it is a predominant theme right now, and I'm the rare person who doesn't like hot weather. I don't like humidity. I function much better in the autumn and the winter time. Um, Weather gets a little cooler. I'm just in heaven. I can concentrate. Um, I can create. When the weather's like this, it feels like a nonstop anxiety attack. Just, I don't know where I get all this sensitivity to heat from. Maybe it's because I tend to be hot blooded myself. I know in Chinese medicine, where they talk about having heat in your body, often it is related to people who tend to be a little more high strung, a little more stressed, a little more anxiety, type A people, and I certainly fall into that category. Uh, some people are surprised to see that I'm a type A person, but I'm someone who's quite driven. I've always got projects. I've always got something I want to write, something that I want to paint and draw, ideas for these live streams, because I'm up to 3 a week now. Um, this one is the one that's very loose and just I let it go wherever it goes. The Tuesday and Thursday shows I do with the wonderful Dr. Whimsy Anderson, I have to be on my toes with those, and that's a lot of that's out of respect to Whimsy and also out of respect to the audience we get on that show because we talk about a lot of current events, politics, as they would say on The View, hot topics. And then I also do something very different on there. Whimsy and I do intuitive readings with our tarot cards, oracle cards. Many times I have messages that I've channeled. Um, I've debated over incorporating some of that into this show, but then I've always just loved how when we all get on here together, we start talking. And all of you, Renee, and whomever else joins. I love it when you just ask me questions or topics at me. I'm a strange person in that I have a head full of old Hollywood trivia and a lot of I Love Lucy trivia because I worked on a book on I Love Lucy a while back. Oh, thank you, Renee. Yeah, my dear late friend Bart Andrews, who wrote the I Love Lucy book, he and I together worked on a sequel. This was about 20 years ago, and a lot of that had to do with the fact my dear friend Bart had suffered a series of strokes, and it was difficult for him to write, but he still had his research, and I had my research, and Bart also had his Rolodex. We don't hear much about Rolodexes anymore, but it was just a big fat Rolodex loaded with phone numbers of people who either were on I Love Lucy or who worked on I Love Lucy or who knew Lucy and Desi or so forth. So Bart gave me what I needed to carry on the research and the writing, and it was 3 years of just passion and love. I'm a research junkie. and particularly when it's old show business history. I can just go deeper and deeper into that. So that's why a lot of that stuff is up in my head. And that's why I can easily talk about it. I wonder if some more people are going to join us, Renee. Usually when I start late, people still come in, but let's see what happens. See if people got notified. I hope they did. If not, the show just might be a little shorter than I planned, because I was actually kind of hoping not to go on like an hour and a half, 2 hours like I usually have, because I do have some things I have to tend to. Hey, Andy. Hi. Thank you for joining. Yes, let's see what happens. Yeah, one of the things I have to do is, because I do the show with Whimsy on Tuesdays, tomorrow is our author interview. And it was one of the few times I couldn't get a hardcover copy of the book. I could only get it on Kindle on my my iPad. I was trying to pull it up here so I can plug what we're going to talk about tomorrow. But I find that I usually don't like reading this way. I guess because I'm old school. I'm old, but I like a book in my hands. I like the feel of the paper, the texture, turning the pages. And it feels like a richer experience. But in this case, there was no choice because there were no hardcover copies available. So I'm trying to pull up the cover here. The book we're doing tomorrow, Maybe Next Time Around, by Sylvia Sullivan. And it's, hey, Jim, thank you for joining. It's a book about reincarnation. It's a topic that I'm very intrigued by. And I'm in the midst of it right now, but I've got to get it finished tonight. And then I've got to start formulating my interview questions, which is, that's like the lifeblood of a show like that. You have to be prepared. You have to know. I always try to have prepared questions in front of me, but also through listening and exchanging energy with the author, letting the conversation go where it needs to go. But at least I've got some guidelines to work with. This show I do with no safety net. I used to a long time ago. Now I'm brave. I just get on here with no notes, no preparation, and decide to just let it go wherever it's going to go. But this one I definitely have to be prepared for. That's why I may not be able to make the show go quite as long today, because I've got a few hours of reading to do tonight, preparation. But I love this. I'm doing a lot of things in my life that I love and I'm passionate about right now. I'm doing my art. I'm doing my writing. I'm doing these live streams. Even the news is bad, as we all know the news often is. I still like being on top of this. I like having an understanding of it. I do enjoy learning. I love researching. So, that's another thing I'll be doing tonight, and part of my preparation for the show tomorrow. And sometimes I'll spend 3-4 hours preparing, just going over news stories and things. And then when we do the actual show, we'll spend maybe 10 minutes actually talking about it. But at least, as I've said to others, I hope I don't look like a deer in the headlights. I look like I'm at least showing some proficiency while I'm on the show. But it's just so great to see your comments here. I love Renee. We'll have a party. Yes, that's what this is like. It's like a little party. And just feel free to ask me whatever you want, bring up things. And of course, you all know about my friend Anastasia. Not Anastasia, Anastasia Pavlov, and her show at 7. And I thank you with all my heart for all of you who go over there to her, because it really means a lot to her. And I'm proud of her, because she started doing this about 3 months ago. And it was, if I may say this, it was at my suggestion. I thought she'd be a natural at doing live streams like this, and she most certainly is. But it's gone a long way in just healing her after, I'm not saying anything she doesn't talk about herself. Her boyfriend dumped her, and then she got fired from her job the same week. And if you know Anastasia, she's deeply, deeply sensitive, and it was hard. It was hard for her. So I thank you, because all of you are giving her love right now. You're giving her love, you're giving her an audience, and letting her just shine and sparkle. And sometimes soon, oh, Jim, her boyfriend dumped her. You didn't know that. I hope I didn't reveal anything. The reason I said that was because I watched enough of her shows to know that she's generally very open about these things. You know, she's very sure she's talked about that. You know, so hey, Joyce. Oh, by the way, Joyce, I haven't forgotten to text you back. You know, this is, folks, this is private between Joyce and me. But Joyce, I'm going to text you later and tell you about how things worked out. It's good. It's really good right now, and I'm excited to tell you. But anyway, so much for personal stuff here. And of course, Joyce, I'm sure all of you out there know what a gifted astrologer and numerologist she is. And Joyce, I hope you're going to be doing your own show again soon, you know, because you've got so much to share with people. In fact, I recommend these live streams to any of you people. You know, it's whether it's your cup of tea or not, but it's great if you have any kind of expertise to share, or, you know, you want to enlighten people in any way, whatever you feel your purpose is. I always enjoy doing this every Monday, getting together with you. And I know Anastasia, she's been doing it several times a week right now. She's loving it. And you know, it's something that any of us can do. Any of us. I'm very lucky to do Whimsy Show, because that's where I really get my audience. And that's also, I've told you, Whimsy is, you know, she's one of my dearest friends in the world, and she's helped me to grow, evolve, expand. She has, ever since I've known her for over a decade, she has always done little things to get me out of my comfort zones, because she sees things in me that maybe I couldn't see for myself. And you know, we're all guilty of that, but she would always insist that I was capable of doing a lot more than I realized. And so she's the one who got me into this, doing live streams, you know. And with her show, we've done some episodes where we get as many as 10,000 viewers. This show is considerably smaller. It's smaller, it's more intimate, but it, you know, it also gives me a chance to warm up a little, you know, for the Tuesdays and Thursdays. This helps me to get comfortable with this, because, folks, believe it or not, I can be a little shy. I know everybody's like, bullshit. You're not shy. Everybody I tell that to. But sometimes we see ourselves in ways that other people don't. I know I certainly felt shy initially doing this. I don't feel so much anymore. Let's see, I'm looking at some of the comments here. People saying hello to each other. And let's see, anyway, I did give the plug for the book we're going to talk about tomorrow, maybe next time around, Sylvia Sullivan. And also, I want to give a plug to my very dear friend, Pam, of her channel, Pomona Remembers. It's Pomona, period, Remembers. That's how you can find her. And she wanted me to tell you she has a new video coming out. I think she released it today, something special. And you know, she's a wonderful psychic, intuitive, does heart-centered remote viewing, her own channeling, and she channeled Ozzy Osbourne and came up with some really interesting things. And so I promised her that I will give you a plug, tell you all to please check it out, because I find anything Pam puts up is worthwhile. Very worthwhile. She's been a good friend for me. She's been a great educator for me. Those are my favorite people. I find anybody who becomes a close friend to me, it's usually because I'm drawn to them because there's something expansive about them, someone where I can learn, I can grow, I can evolve with this person. And Andy, you're asking, will Pam ever do a live video? I don't know. Because I think Pam is more comfortable doing pre-recorded videos. I don't want to tell her personal stuff, but she has done live but I think she gets more enjoyment out of pre-recording, and that's fine also, though we've done some live things. In fact, Joyce, you and I, we have a funny story of the time you and Pam and I did a three-way video together. It was last year. We did a 90-minute special in honor of Carol Burnett's birthday. Like Joyce did Carol Burnett's astrological chart. I told my stories of the 3 times I had met Carol Burnett, and I've told them on here before, so I don't need to repeat them again. But I've had 3 off the charts encounters with Carol Burnett. I mean, just an amazing woman and what she meant to me growing up. And then Pam talked about how Carol Burnett had meant so much to her as well, and it's in my videos. In fact, I reran it this year. It was a period where I was not feeling well and I couldn't be on camera, and it just coincided with Carol Burnett's 92nd birthday. I had to think, was it 91st, 92nd birthday? And I think 92nd. I believe she was born in 1933. So her birthday was April 27th, 1933. So if you go back to my videos in the vault on my channel, Chuck's Captivating Chronicles, you will see it. It's a 90-minute special. It's really good that Joyce Petrus and Pamela Pomona Remembers and I did together, and we put a lot of love into it. But the reason I said, Joyce, you and I can laugh about it is because we did it. We had to do it I think a third time. The first time we were just having flat out technical difficulties and we had to abandon it. The second time, this is the funny story, we did a perfect 90-minute show. It was so good, and we were so excited it was done. And then Pam was like, guys, and we were like, what? I forgot to hit the record button. Remember that, Joyce? That whole show, we didn't record it. And we had to get together again and do it all over. And I think we did a good job doing it a third time. But it was, that was just like the funniest thing, that look on Pam's face and then the look on our faces when we realized that we had done 90 minutes of blank air. But it happens. Third time's a charm. We're proud of it. I think you can see that we came from a place of genuine love, and that's the way I like to work. Utter sincerity, love. That's what Whimsy and I do, and we do our shows together. Whimsy and I, we go back. I think it's 11 years now, and we have oh yeah, now everybody's confirming to me Carol Burnett's 92, Andy and Jim. Yeah, I thought it was because it's 1933. But lost my train of thought there. What was I saying? I just lost my train of thought. That is a senior moment. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining. But anyway, I was talking about our Carol Burnett special and how we put it together, and we did with. Oh yeah, I was talking about how Whimsy and I, we have something that's organic. What you see when we do our show is just our real friendship. And you see the two of us getting silly with each other, ridiculous with each other. And sometimes we have to really helm ourselves in, especially if it's a very serious topic. It doesn't look too good to be giggling when you're talking about something bad. And that's how we have to rein ourselves in, or at least I have to rein myself in. I shouldn't speak for Whimsy like that. But I think I was talking about this last week when Robert Redford died, and I was talking about how one of my favorite movies of all time is The Way We Were. And I've seen this article appear several times this week, or I should say this account I've seen this week, where Redford and Streisand both separately and together talked about how they purposely avoided each other when off camera because they had an intense curiosity about each other, and they wanted that to be seen on camera. They wanted that relationship to unfold on camera in front of the audience for real. And there was a story that Streisand was in her trailer the first day of shooting. She was extremely nervous. And she was asking, please, can you have Robert Redford just come to my trailer, talk to me for a few minutes? And Redford said, no, I'm not doing that. She's going to meet me for the first time on the set. And the camera's rolling. And because the first scene they filmed together was that scene where they're in college and they're at the college, we can call it the prom, the school dance or whatever. And Redford cuts in to dance with her. And you see how nervous and shy and vulnerable Barbra Streisand was. Well, that was real. It was completely real. And those are just the most beautiful moments on camera. And I was taking acting class, with Dee Wallace, who played the mother in E.T. She said, money can't buy that. That is gold when you get that on camera. Those real moments. That's what she was always trying to teach us in class, about spontaneity and letting life just breathe into a scene and let the life take it wherever it needs to go. But one of the other things I was going to say is that you can never, she taught me this, you can never lie to the camera. The camera knows. The camera magnifies everything. It picks up your aura. It picks up what's in your eyes, your body language, your voice. And of course, she was referring to acting, but I think it refers to anything, especially something like this, or like what Whimsy and I do. And our friendship, I guess I'm getting back to saying what we have is organic. And people respond to that because of the honesty. What was this here? Some comments here. The movie, I like. Oh, that's right. He did play that was his last movie. He played a very small role in the Captain America movie. And honestly, I couldn't remember if he played a bad guy or not. I remember he was interviewed. He said, well, I've never done a superhero movie. Something different. Chris, what did I think of Inside Daisy Clover? Well, I have not seen that movie in many. I'm very familiar with it, but I haven't seen it in many years. And I'd like to see it again. I know the whole thing about Natalie Wood, the teenage star, in Hollywood in the 30s and all the problems. And one thing I do know about that is Robert Redford. I don't know if they actually said it or they implied it, but he was playing what was rare for the time, but playing a gay man. And I understand that they had dialogue that was more specific, but it was cut. So you weren't quite sure, but that's how Redford was playing it. And he was hoping that it would just be implied. It's on TCM quite often, as I see. Chris, I don't have TCM anymore. I wish I had that. I wish TCM was a streaming channel. A standalone streaming channel. I would subscribe to it in a heartbeat. I know there's some of it on HBO Max, and I should restream that again. I dropped a lot of my streaming channels because I had too many. It was absurd how much money I was spending on streaming channels. And a lot of that went back to the days of the pandemic lockdown. We couldn't go out anywhere. We were shut in. So it felt justifiable. Okay, I can't go to restaurants. I can't go to the movies. I can't go to see plays. I'll just spend my money on streaming. Well, I just kept streaming channels way too long. I pared it down to about 3 or 4 now, and even that's too much because I'm not watching a lot of television anymore these days. But TCM, I would happily subscribe to that if they would just make themselves available. I don't know why they've never done it. And I've read some things about TCM, like, they might be even in a little bit of trouble because unfortunately, a lot of, shall we say, the younger generations, the younger demographics are not into these old Hollywood movies anymore. It's a shrinking, diminishing audience. And it's even been questioned how much longer TCM can hang around. but I remember it back in the glory days. Hey, Terry, thank you. Oh, what a sweet thing to say. Um, I remember back in the glory days, and I used to have it on all the time. And I'm old enough to remember um, something we used to have here in Los Angeles. It was a local cable station, a local movie channel called the Z channel. And it has since it's been off the air for many, many years, but it's still legendary. I understand there was even a documentary made about the Z channel. And it was a movie lover's dream. You remember, this is Los Angeles. This is the industry here. This is Film Town. We have so many film lovers here. Well, more than film lovers, we have people who actually make the films, create all of this magic. So Z Channel had a lot of supporters, and Z Channel was so eclectic. You would have foreign movies, you would have little independent films, you'd have mainstream, and then you'd have lots of old classics, but they would dig into the vault and find obscure old classics. And and also silent movies. And then they would show things from the early days of sound. And some of those movies I've never seen released on DVD or Blu-ray or streaming ever since. That was the only chance to ever see those things. And that was back in the era of VHS, VCRs, that type of thing. And I used to record a lot of those things, but I have very few VHS tapes. I held on to a number of those for a long time. Me being the big movie lover, I had probably hundreds of tapes. It was crazy, just crazy. And a number of years ago when I was moving and I needed very much to downsize. And in downsizing, I also decided it was a good time to clean out my storage unit. And anybody's ever had a storage unit can tell you that usually you go in there. Many of us will have it. We don't go there for years. It's just the security of having it put away. And then we go in there and start going through and going like 80% of this stuff. Why am I paying money to store this shit? I mean, like old kitchen appliances and things like that. And I realized I could have just bought new appliances for what I was paying every month to rent this storage unit to keep these things. And also, it was that period 10 years ago. I had boxes and boxes of VHS tapes. And part of me, it hurt to take those things and throw them in the dumpster. I'd look at them one by one. Oh, and then I thought, no, I'm not going to use this. I don't even know where my VCR is anymore. Well, actually, I did. It was buried somewhere in my storage unit, but it wasn't in my home anymore. So I just bit the bullet and threw a lot of those tapes away. And probably I need to do that with a lot of DVDs right now. The thought of doing that, after all the time and money I put into the collection. But DVDs made their way to Blu-ray. Blu-ray made its way to 4K UHD, ultra high definition. And of course, we all know that most of that has gone the way of just streaming, downloading. And then I'm in a place where I just don't have time to watch a lot of this stuff anymore. It's kind of a case of been there, done that. Move on to some other pastures. See, people are still saying hello to each other. That's something, Andy, that your VHS tapes are still holding up, because I found a few of mine that I did get out and try to play. A lot of them wouldn't play anymore, or they had degraded. Videotape is notorious for deteriorating. The magnetic particles start falling off. The tape starts stretching, even breaks. And even under the best of conditions, videotapes need to be stored in climate controlled conditions. One of the shows we did, I talked about the salt mines in Utah, and I think even in Kansas, in that area, like miles underground, there are these film storage vaults, videotape storage vaults, because salt keeps things dry, but also it's very cool underground. So it's just the right climate conditions for that type of thing. But it's a debate over which one deteriorates quicker, film or videotape. I'm inclined to think it's videotape, but film, most any film made before, I think it's about 1951, was on nitrate stock. And nitrate is extraordinarily perishable. It's also extraordinarily flammable. There used to be a lot of problems in movie theaters going up in flames, burning down because of the nitrate film. And I understand you had to have projectionists who were thoroughly trained in fire control and how to handle nitrate film. So either it would burst in flames or it would crumble into powder. That's why we have maybe 10% remaining of all the silent movies that were ever made. Most of them have long since deteriorated. A little more care was taken with the sound era films, but even those, there's been deterioration. You know, I talked recently about Sunset Boulevard, you know, the wonderful Gloria Swanson film, and I held up my copy, my 4K ultra high definition disc of Sunset Boulevard that had just been released on the 75th anniversary of the movie. And there was a story about how the original negative was on nitrate film and it had deteriorated so badly. And that's often the case of classic movies, big hit movies. You take that same negative and you just keep striking print after print after print after print. And the more popular film, the more prints that get struck, and hence the negative deteriorates a lot faster. And that's what happened to Sunset Boulevard. That happened to a lot of the Laurel and Hardy movies. So many prints were made that they just kept, the poor negative just started falling apart to a lot of their films. And we are blessed now that we live in this digital era where you can do magic. And that's what happened with Sunset Boulevard. They had to make a new negative for that movie, which, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, I don't know how long we've had the technology, that would have been impossible. They had to go through, this was a very, very expensive process. Paramount, which owned the film, decided that the film had such cultural significance and it was so important to film history that they spent the reportedly millions of dollars to do this. They had to take that negative frame by frame by frame, digitally scan it in like something like 16K, you know, like it's this unbelievably high resolution, and frame by frame by frame, digital artists had to go in there and start touching it up, fixing it. And part of the process is taking parts of another frame that are like something in a person's clothing or on the wall, the couch or whatever, take that piece of that and put that in the computer and then put it into that part of that frame where it's not in such good condition. It's enormously time consuming, painstaking, but the results are stunning. My 4K version of Sunset Boulevard, you would swear it was made from the original camera negative. The detail, the gray tones, everything is just pristine, like you're watching it for the first time on a movie theater. And I'm such a purist about that sort of thing, you know. And so if you're lucky enough to have, first of all, you have to have a 4K high definition television, which most of us have now. You know, if you bought a television in the last 5 years or so, it probably is 4K. But a lot of people don't have the 4K Blu-ray player. That's the key. You got to have that. But when you put those two together, it is just truly a cinematic experience. I love it. And, in fact, one of the movies I wanted to watch last week, and I couldn't get around to it because, you know, Mr. Redford passed away, and my favorite movie of his is The Way We Were. And I happen to have The Way We Were in 4K UHD, and I haven't watched it in a long time. I was going to put it on, so maybe I'll watch it this week. But I'm just so grateful we have this technology. You know, I'm not so happy about the colorization that's done with movies. So the argument can be made that the black and white version still exists. There's just a color version that stands alongside this. The difference, Andy, 4K and Blu-ray, 4K is 4 times the resolution of a Blu-ray. I forget what K a Blu-ray typically would be, but it's my understanding, I hope I'm explaining this correctly, it is 4 times the resolution. A lot of streaming channels broadcast in 4K. You know, Netflix, Amazon Prime. I see a lot of 4K programming on Netflix. You have to pay a little extra for it. But if you've got the television, it is so worth to pay the few extra dollars for this. Trust me on that. It's just dazzling. The clarity, the way it pops, the colors, the vibrancy. But it was interesting with Sunset Boulevard. They took that technology and applied it to a black and white movie, but with the gorgeous gray tones that you get in a black and white movie. You know, if any of you have been lucky enough to watch a great classic movie on the big screen in the theater, it's, you know what I'm talking about. You know, it's so different from watching it on a regular, back in the days when we'd watch it on just a regular resolution television, or those of us who are old enough can remember when an old movie would be shown on television. It would just be a crappy 16 millimeter print, and it just looked terrible. Now we're all getting things that are much closer to what was intended. I was watching a couple of episodes last night of a little show, you might have heard of it, called I Love Lucy. Every so often I like to revisit that. Now, you know, that's on Paramount Plus. Yes, one of my streaming channels I should probably get rid of. I still have. And they have restored that in 4K. Wow. Here's this show. It's almost 75 years old, and it looks gorgeous. I love to see it that way. But, you know, you can get I Love Lucy on Blu-ray now also. They just released the complete series. And recommend anything related to Lucy, let me tell you. And looking at comments here, I see Ingrid. Hi, thank you for joining. And let's see. What was this, Andy? Just think the future where the VR movies, where it feels like you're actually in the movies. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're getting there. Did you ever see a Woody Allen movie called The Purple Rose of Cairo? It was made back in the late 80s. I adore the film. It's set in the 1930s. And of course, you know, we hear the stories back during the heart of the Depression. People would pay their dime and go to the movies to escape their troubles. And of course, this was obviously before television. There was radio, but there was nothing quite like movies. And it wasn't unusual for a little town to have 3 or 4 movie theaters. And in those days, it was common to go to the movie theater for at least 4 times a week. You know, no television. You went to the movie theater, and it was affordable and it was accessible. But anyway, in The Purple Rose of Cairo, Mia Farrow, she's this, I think, a waitress in a restaurant, and she's in this bad marriage, and her life is so grim. And she goes to the movie theaters, and she sees like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers dancing on screen, and people in their beautiful gowns and jewels and sats. And of course, that was true. That Hollywood was the great dream factory. The movie stars like Joan Crawford, Greta Garbo, Clark Gable, they were like gods and goddesses. They were being projected 40 feet high on these silvery screens while people, as Norma Desmond said in Sunset Boulevard, there's wonderful people in the dark. And that's what it was like. There was just something so romantic about it. And anyway, Mia Farrow would go to the movie theater and lose herself in the movies. And then one day, I'm not ruining the movie for anyone because everybody knows this, but the leading man in the movie, I think, it was Jeff Daniels. He's in the middle of the scene, then he stops and turns, and he breaks the fourth wall and looks through the movie screen and points to Mia Farrow in her movie theater seat and goes, yo, you've been here 3 times this week. Hey, you came to see me again. And she's like, what? And of course, he jumps out of the movie screen, flesh and blood, full color, and joins her. And they try to run off together or something. I got to see the movie again, but they captured all the cliches of old Hollywood. Like the car would start with, he couldn't understand why the car wouldn't start without a key. And he couldn't understand why he couldn't pay for things with play money, stuff like that. And then later, this was where I loved it. Mia Farrow jumps into the movie screen with him. And now Mia Farrow is in the black and white movie. And it's all the glamour and glitz and schmaltz and of course little plays like, when she's poured champagne, she drinks and goes, this is ginger ale. And you see that it's actually a lot of flats and sats, but they go off to the nightclub together and you see a montage of neon signs. And it's so beautifully done. And there was the great cinematographer, Gordon Willis, who was the cinematographer on the Godfather movies. He did many Woody Allen's films back then. I was astounded that the man never won an Academy Award. I think he was one of our greatest cinematographers. But the way he made it look authentically like an old black and white movie from the 30s, and the way the montage and everything, it's just, I think it's a masterpiece. So it's fun to talk about that, about being in a movie. I have to admit that's always been my fantasy, to jump into one of those old Hollywood films, and hasn't happened yet. But anyway, check out The Purple Rose of Cairo. I want to check it out again. I want to jump into an episode of I Love Lucy. That's what I want to do. Years ago, there was a lot of festivity for the 50th anniversary of the show. And down in Orange County at the Orange County Fair, they had a traveling exhibit of I Love Lucy. I mean, where they had original props from the show. They recreated to full scale, the Tropicana nightclub. They recreated the suite that they had in Hollywood. And they also recreated that first apartment. They had the brick wall, the fireplace, the early Americana, the piano, the horse pictures. I mean, just perfectly recreated everything. So you got to be on those sets. And they did a really cool thing. I don't know where my photograph is, but you could get your picture taken where they put you into an episode of I Love Lucy where you were actually there with I Love Lucy. And it's really cute. I have myself reacting to Lucy doing something, and it's really cute. But I'd like to have taken that further than just a still photograph. And I do have a funny story there. I can tie in with it. If you've all seen National Lampoon's Vacation, the Chevy Chase version from the 80s, and how the family is traveling across the country to go to this place called Wally World. Obviously, a takeoff on Disneyland. They travel like 3,000 miles to go to Wally World, only to find that it's closed for the season. Well, I went to the 50th anniversary I Love Lucy celebration in the Orange County Fair. And I told a friend of mine, in fact, Chris, if you're watching, I don't think Scott would mind me saying it was him. It was Scott who went with me. And I was building this up to him. Oh, you got to go. Because he's a big I Love Lucy fan. And I said, oh, Scott, you're just going to love this. You're going to love being on the sets and everything. And I build it up to him. This is like 2 days later. And we get in the car and we drive all the way down to Orange County. And I look over to the fair site. I notice it's kind of dark. and it's kind of empty looking. And we pull up. The fair had closed the night before. We had driven all the way down there, and we both turned to each other and said, Wally World. It happened for real. I don't know if any of you out there have stories like that, but that's my Wally World story, and it ties in with the I Love Lucy. And Chris, I see you're going, who? Ha 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 ha. Normally I wouldn't. I try to be respectful of people's privacy on here. Like Joyce, I told you, something personal I'll text you about later, but you know what it is. And it's good. But I think Scott would be okay with me saying that was him, because he wasn't at fault. It was me. It was my blunder. I should have checked into it, but I thought they're not going to close 2 days from now. They did. Yeah. Yes, Andy. So I was talking about Wally World, like from National Lampoon, the vacation movies with Chevy Chase. I have to remember to say Chevy Chase because I didn't see it, but I think there was a remake. I can't think of the guy. He used to be on the TV show The Office, and he was also in the movie The Hangover. Ed Helms, where he took over the Chevy Chase role. And I think I haven't seen it, but I think he's playing Rusty. Remember, there was a son and a daughter, and the son was named Rusty. Well, he's playing the adult version of Rusty all these years later. Yes, I did see like a clip from it where Chevy Chase, now elderly Chevy Chase, had a cameo as the grandfather, and they were stopping by to see him before they went on their trip. John Candy was the guard at Wally World, and the Griswold forced him at gunpoint, yes, to let them into the park and take them on the rides. Yeah, it's funny. A very good friend of mine met John Candy. It was at a Dodgers game at the stadium, and they sat near each other, and they had hot dogs and Cokes and peanuts. And he said, John Candy was the sweetest guy. Just my friend adored him. What was it? Is that the one I can remember her name who died on top in the trip to the car? Yes, that was Imogene Coca. And I don't think she quite knew what they planned to do with her character, because I think she found that rather distasteful, that her dead body was strapped on top of the car. Yeah, she died. They got coerced into bringing her along on the trip. You remember Randy Quaid, the cousin or something, and they brought him back for Christmas Vacation. I think was like the 3rd movie in the series. But anyway, the family got coerced into taking her on the trip and the dog. And she ended up dying, and they didn't know what to do with her except strap her body to the top of the station wagon. They wrapped her up, of course. It was terrible. Very bad taste. Imogene Coca, I saw her on stage once. I talked about this. I saw her do a stage show with Sid Caesar. It was a 2-person show where they were recreating their best moments from Your Show of Shows from the 1950s. And I think she was 85 at the time, and he was 78, and they were brilliant. Their comedic timing was just razor sharp, still there, and they were doing intense physical comedy together at their ages, and I was so excited I got to see that. I better get back to my comments here. Weird question: when a TV show went to color and say 65, 66, did they have to refilm the opening, or was it originally filmed in color, such as Gilligan's Island, Beverly Hillbillies, The Lucy Show? Okay, in most cases they did have to refilm the openings, but if Chris, those shows, you watch the color version, the black and white version opening credits. I'm always amazed at how well they captured it. I mean, you might find some little subtle variations, but they did a very good job of recreating all of that in color. And you consider some cases, those openings had been filmed like 3, 4, 5 years earlier. Like the Andy Griffith show comes to mind, the famous opening with the whistle and Opie and Andy at their fishing poles. They went back. They went back to that location and just recreated it again. Beverly Hillbillies, the whole thing. Jed Clampett shooting and oil coming up and him running into the cabin to get Granny, and they're jumping him down there, loading up the truck and heading for Beverly, all of that. But there is one exception I do know of. Well, actually, I think even this, they filmed it again. Hazel, the first season of the show was in black and white. The remaining 4 were in color. But there was one episode. It was like a test episode. The show premiered in 1961. It was a test episode. And it also helped the show was on NBC because NBC was owned by RCA. And RCA wanted to sell color TVs. Hence, that's why NBC led colored broadcasting those days. They did a test episode of Hazel in 1961. And, of course, had to do the whole opening credit in color. And first I thought, well, they knew they were going to do color, so they filmed it in color and then converted it to black and white. No, I'm remembering now, even that they had to refilm in color. But you watched it side by side, it's almost perfect the way they did it. And, that was an exciting time. This year is really the 60th anniversary of when television switched over to color. 1965 there obviously were color shows on. Bonanza was in color. Hazel. I'd have to think back to what some others were, but at 65 that was the big year. There were a few black and white shows left, but not many. Dick Van Dyke was still in black and white. The first year of I Dream of Jeannie was in black and white, 1965, when like all the other shows were in color. And I read, like in the case of the Dick Van Dyke show, they knew that was going to be their last year because they decided it was going to be a 5-year run. And they wanted to keep the show consistent for syndication. It started in black and white. They wanted to keep it in black and white. But the other reason was it would have cost a lot of money because they would have had to redone all the sets for color, costumes, everything. And so they made a decision, let's just keep it black and white. That's why it was one of the very few shows still on in black and white. I Dream of Jeannie, part of that was NBC didn't have a lot of faith in the show. But secondly, the special effects. They thought it was going to be easier and cheaper to do the special effects if they filmed it in black and white as opposed to color, which would be more revealing of a lot of the secrets behind the special effects. The case of the Lucy show. And I've always thought this was asinine on the part of CBS. The Lucy show, the very first year was in black and white. It did not appear in color until 1965 for its 4th season. But the second and third years of the show, because Lucy was very shrewd. We know about how she was responsible for Star Trek at Desilu. She was a very smart businesswoman, and she headed Desilu Studios. And she knew the Lucy show was going to have more value in syndication if it was in color. So she was the one who insisted. Her studio, Desilu, footed the bill for this. She began filming her shows in color. CBS would not air them because they had a policy about not having color yet. It was still a sore spot for them because they had tried a competing method of color broadcasting in the 50s that got trounced by NBC's version. And the difference was NBC's version was compatible with black and white and color TVs. The CBS version could only broadcast their own unique color set. So it died very quickly. So CBS it was a sore spot about color broadcasting. But finally in 65, they realized it was the future. There was no choice. They had to do it. So that's when they started airing the color episodes of the Lucy show. And that's why now because now you see the Lucy show like on Hulu or Amazon, places like that. You see it in syndication. You will see only 1 year of black and white, and then it instantly jumps to color. And so it's an interesting period. 1965, 66. I can imagine how magical that must have been. I remember when I was a kid, we got our first color TV, and a little boy, I remember the excitement, having, all my favorite shows, I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, Lucy Show, Beverly Hills, all those shows, just 1 week, see them in black and white. And then the next week, because we had just gotten our color set in time for the fall season, that was magical. Like to see Barbara Eden walk out and go, oh my God, her outfit's pink. Wow, look how red Lucy's hair is. To see all that for the first time, Anyway, I guess that's enough about that subject, right? But that's the way this show works. As you know, you give me a topic and I can usually go on and on about it. Oh wait, anyway, okay, you're talking about the vacation movies. Yeah, Christy Brinkley in the car. Yeah, she didn't make too many movies. It's one of her rare appearances. Certainly beautiful woman, beautiful presence, but maybe it just turned out she couldn't act. Now, I'm not saying that to be derogatory, just maybe that's it, because acting isn't as easy as it looks. The only reason it looks easy is because you have a really good actor who knows how to take all that rehearsal and all that memorization and all that processing and work and make it look effortless and natural. It's like you watch Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly dance. It looks so effortless. Never mind the fact that those men would spend 2 months preparing those dance numbers. Or Gene Kelly was once asked, wow, how did you not sweat? And Gene said, oh, we sweated. We sweated a lot. He said what the secret was, we would have multiple versions of the costumes. And after I do a take, I would go take it off, shower, clean up and everything, put on a clean outfit, come out, and then we'd do another take. So it always gave the illusion of not sweating. I asked Evelyn Keyes once, my friend, the movie actress of the 1940s, how did you do all those kissing scenes and not like have all your lipstick come off and everything? And she said, because every time we would do a new take, before the cameras would roll, the makeup artist would be there touching up our lipstick and fixing our hair and everything. So we always looked perfect. It was that illusion. That's the magic of Hollywood. I'm not sure, Andy, when Imogene Coca passed away. We could look that up. I know when I saw her, I know she was 86. Let me think. I think that was around 1991. I saw them in Westwood Village at what is now known as the Geffen Theater. Pardon me. I had to drink a little water there. But yes, someone was asking me, oh, Jack, did you see Imogene Coca and Sid Caesar? Oh, yes, it was Jim. Yeah, I did. And it was an incredible night. Here it is more than 30 years later, and I still remember it vividly. And I always count my blessings that someone of my generation could experience the two of them live and in person. Really fortunate. And Sid Caesar's show was quite magnificent. I believe you can find some things on YouTube. But what's really fascinating about the Sid Caesar show were all of the writers. You had Carl Reiner. You had Woody Allen. You had Neil Simon. I forget who else, but it was like these men who went on to become giants in their own right as writers. In fact, Carl Reiner allegedly based the Dick Van Dyke Show, the premise of Rob Petrie, being a television writer for Alan Brady. Supposedly, the Alan Brady character was based on Sid Caesar, but it's said he's also been based on people like Red Skelton and I think one or two other television hosts. It was like he was a parody of a very egotistical, self-centered television star that everybody had to cater to his whims. And yeah, there were some elements there that Carl Reiner used. And of course, Rosemary, we've talked about this on some other recent shows where um, she was based on Selma Diamond, who was a writer on Your Show of Shows. And I mentioned she was also based on Madeline Pugh Davis, depending on what time frame. Madeline had different husbands. I think one point she's billed on I Love Lucy as Madeline Pugh. Then she was later billed as Madeline Davis, but so forth. But anyway, it was rare for women to be writing in those days on television, extraordinarily rare. And of course, I Love Lucy had their own, what they called girl writer. I know that's sexist to say today, but that was their term, girl writer. But it was a very smart move because you needed a woman, Lucy and Ethel, you needed that woman's perspective, the way a woman feels, thinks. She gave that dimension. And also poor Madeline, and I've met her, I've talked to her. She, great lady, beautiful lady. She lived to be about 90. It fell to her to test Lucy's stunts to make sure they were safe, because Lucy was a star. You couldn't afford to have something bad happen to Lucy. So poor Madeline, you're expendable, honey. Sorry to tell you this, but they had her test out all those outrageous stunts to make sure they weren't dangerous for Lucy. And I asked Madeline about it, and she said, yes. Oh, yeah, it's true. And I said, did you have to have honey poured over your head like Lucy did? And she said, no, thank goodness they didn't make me do that. They didn't make me do that one. But I think they did make her do some things, like the time they lowered Lucy down. Well, it wasn't really a helicopter, it was a soundstage, but she was like 40, 50 feet up the top of the rafters of the soundstage, and they had to lower her down onto the soundstage. That was for real. I think poor Madeline, they had to put her through that. And Lucy even said that was terrifying. Lucy once said, I'm not funny. What I am is brave. And that was an example where she had to be really brave because she had a terrible fear of heights. And she had to do it. She knew there were like 93 people down there, camera operators, a studio audience, all the actors. The show depended on this scene. It was like the big moment. And she was scared to death up there. And she had no choice but to just get on there and do it. And lower down. And of course she did do it. And it's funny. The bottom line was she would do anything for a laugh. Truly anything for a laugh. What are some other comments here? Wait, I got to scroll back here. I'm so sorry. Let me go back here. I went down too far. Pardon me, please. This is live, and I see people saying hello to each other. I got to go back. That's it. Oh, someone was talking about, Shirley Booth and Hazel, of course. Oh, Andy, I always knock on the fridge door because for opening it, who knows, there might be salad dressing. Oh, that reminds me of a Gary Larson Far Side cartoon. It shows these condiments in the refrigerator, and they have little stick figure legs and arms, and the mustard and the mayonnaise jar are holding their hands up, and there's this what was it, this bowl of coleslaw or something, and it's holding them up at gunpoint, and it says, when coleslaw goes bad. It's like, it was coleslaw, it was something like that, when something goes bad. Let's see, Lone Ranger, Andy, that was, it's interesting you mentioned that, because Lone Ranger and Superman, The Adventures of Superman, those two TV shows from the 50s, They were initially done in black and white. This was very rare in the 1950s. They were filmed in color. And those color episodes now can be regularly seen, DVDs and streaming and so forth. But those shows, it was like what Lucy decided for herself for her show, that they would have more value in syndication and color. The producers, even though they knew very few people were going to see them in color at that time, they knew in the future the shows were going to have value for that reason. Let's see, what are some other comments here? Yes, it is lonely without Ward, but I'm sure he'll be back next week. I think he said something about how he was going to be away. Extreme Brands. I love the Lucy show. Well, for me too. That was the first time I saw Lucy. But I was lucky because I also saw I Love Lucy in the mornings. They would show that in the mornings, and then of course the Lucy show was on Monday nights, usually like 8:30 or 9 o'clock. They sometimes vary, but it's been love. It was love at first sight. First time I ever saw her. It's been that way ever since. Hey, Valerie. I hope I'm so sorry if I'm missing names here. Extreme Brands. Hello, Valerie. Hi. Thank you for joining. Jim, Joyce. Forgive me if I'm missing your names. Kelly. I'm grateful to have you here. It really means a lot to me that you join me every week, even when I get on here a little late. Really appreciate you all. Extreme Brands. She was absolutely stunning in that program. You know what? Lucy was always stunning. She started out as a chorus girl and then a dress model for the very prestigious Hattie Carnegie dress shop in New York City. And very prestigious, like the cream of society would go there. Movie stars like Joan Crawford, Joan Bennett, would come there to get their wardrobes for the season. And that was when you would have beautiful models come out and, wear the clothes and the gowns and turn around and discuss it. And anyway, Lucy started out as one of those dress models, and she was very good. And that stayed with Lucy. That stayed with her. You watch her throughout her Hollywood career. You watch her throughout television. That woman she was always glamorous. She was always poised, the way she would carry herself like a model. In fact, I've always thought that was part of the secret of Lucille Ball's comedy. You saw her doing this outrageous stuff, pie in the face, getting dunked in grape juice, in the mud, you name it. You never, ever forgot that this was a beautiful lady, a glamorous lady, a woman who her makeup was always impeccable, her hair, the way she dressed, you never forgot that. So it was that dichotomy, that absurdity of a woman like that doing this wild, outrageous slapstick comedy. And it just served her so well. So many elements came into place for Lucy. But yes, to get to the point, she was absolutely stunning. And won 2 lead actress in a comedy series Emmys for the Lucy show. She won 2 Emmys for I Love Lucy, and she got 2 Emmys many years later for the Lucy show. And that clip plays a lot on social media of her accepting her first Emmy. Her first Emmy for the Lucy show. It's actually her 3rd Emmy. And I think you can find that on YouTube. But it's a chance to see Lucy at her most heartfelt and genuine, because when they call her name out, she's genuinely stunned. She really did not think she was going to win, and she gets up there and just says, I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. And she says, it's been a long time, a long time. The last time it had been given to her, it was 14 years earlier. And she said, I thought it was gone. And I'm so happy it's back. And she spoke from the heart. And she said, I love my work. And thank you for giving me this, for loving what I do. And I like seeing Lucy like that. And Chris, Lost in Space really came to life. That show never should have been in black and white. I agree. Color. And not just color, but 1960s pop art mod color. You know what I mean, Chris? Just very 60s colors, and even the clothes they wore and everything. You know, it's just it's a campy show, but it's still fun to watch. And I'm debating over to tell a story. I know. Should I tell this? Oh, it's not too bad. It's not. Well, the actor who played Dr. Smith, according to a friend of mine, he was a flaming queen in real life. He was quite gay. Now, I'm not saying that to be derogatory. I swear to you, I'm not. But he just, those were his words. And I forget the circumstances, but my friend, this was like in the 70s, and he was an actor and very good looking. And Jonathan something, I can't think of his name, played Dr. Smith, had a crush on him and wouldn't leave him alone, and somehow got his phone number and kept calling him. And he had to gently let him down. Forgive me. I hope that's not a bad story to tell, but that just came to mind about him. And my other thing I remember about that show, I got to meet June Lockhart once. She was a sweetheart. And June Lockhart just had her 100th birthday. Isn't that incredible? I can't remember when I met her. It was maybe 25 years ago, but just a lovely, lovely lady. And I remember when I was a kid, I coveted one of those toy robots, you know, the robot from the show, and there was a toy version. I wanted that so bad. And I asked for that for my birthday. And my mother, she really tried to get that for me. She really tried. And she found out it had been discontinued. And she had to break the news to me. And I'm like, no. And I remember being the little drama queen or something. I ran out into the front yard of the house. No. I remember that. Now, I know they make versions of that robot today. I've looked on Amazon and stuff, but it's not the same. They don't make it quite the same way. And I guess I could go on eBay if I really felt I needed to have that robot. I could probably track down one of the originals, but I got over it. Let's see here. Where's some other comments here? Oh yeah, Kelly, I was amazed the first time I saw The Wizard of Oz on a color TV. Oh my God. Yes. I still consider that the greatest use of Technicolor in the history of Hollywood. Can you ever think of a movie that used it so well, where it was actually intrinsic to the plot of the movie? And it was only in latter years after The Wizard of Oz was fully restored, when they went back in the vaults and got the original 3-strip camera negatives and struck a brand new Technicolor print of the movie, the way it was always meant to be seen, with all of the dazzling, vibrant colors and colors that just popped, and the clarity that you had from 3-strip Technicolor. But it was also not just that they restored. The black and white sequences were never in black and white. They were actually shot in sepia tone, which I guess you want to be technical. It was black and white, but it was a special chemical bath where it was processed to turn it into sepia. So now we get to see the beautiful sepia tones of the Kansas sequence. And of course, that tornado sequence is, I think, as a masterpiece, just a masterpiece. When you consider that whole thing was done on a soundstage, and it's believable. I think a lot of the reasons that movie is so believable is because that movie has such heart. That movie has a soul. But what really made the transition to color so effective is after it was restored in the sepia tone, they did this wonderful thing, you know, the bit where the house lands and Dorothy's like, oh, and then she starts walking through the hallway. It's still black and white, sepia black and white. And then it cuts to the scene where she opens the door. Well, what they did, and this is decades before CGI, they had to just do this in camera. They had to use, shall we say, analog special effects. That sequence, they painted everything in perfect sepia tones to match. They had Judy Garland stand in. They put makeup on her wig, the dress, everything was done in sepia tone. So when you photographed it in color, it was seamless. You couldn't tell that it was bad to switch to color because it still fit with the black and white sequence. So that scene where she opens the door and you see that Technicolor, it's extraordinary. It's really extraordinary. I can only imagine what that was like back in 1939, people in the movie theater watching that for the first time, the very first time. And the way they did it, they had Judy stand in, all made up in sepia, makeup, everything, opening the door. And then they had Judy, in her full Technicolor makeup and her blue gingham dress and everything, walk the back her, the stand-in opened the door, and then it was Judy after she'd walked through the doorway in full color. And that's how they did it. And watch it carefully if you can. It is seamless, almost perfect the way they did it. But I remember that. I remember that first time we had a color TV and seeing The Wizard of Oz for the first time. And I've got a funny story there. I was one of the first people to ever have a VCR. I got one when I was in college. I worked weekends at a Burger King to save up for a VCR. And that's when VCRs cost like $1,000. It was a big deal. I remember that first VCR. It was a Betamax. And I swear that thing weighed about 60, 70 pounds. It was a ton. And it was all analog. Like you had two knobs to turn for the channels on it and stuff. And for some reason, I wanted to record The Wizard of Oz. I've always wanted to have my own copy of that. And I don't know what happened. That must have been a screw up with the broadcast signal or something. Because when I went to play my tape back, it was in black and white. The whole movie was in black and white. I don't know why the color didn't record. It was the weirdest thing. Because I was there like, oh, here's the moment. Dorothy opens the door in color. And I'm like, what? All I saw were gray tones. So I had to wait another year to record it again. And by the way, I have the 4K ultra high definition of that. It is stunning to have. They've got something in Vegas right now at a hotel called the Sphere, where they're playing a version of The Wizard of Oz that was, they added a lot of artificial intelligence to it to beef it up and expand the perimeters of it and make it much bigger to work within the confines of, confines are not the right word, the openness of the sphere. It's supposed to be enormous and it's immersive. Like when the tornado happens, they have wind machines, so you feel the wind. When the apples fall off the apple tree, apples drop down in the theater and that type of thing. And I also understand it's like $200 to get a ticket. So I don't think I'm going to be going. And also I'm a big believer in that movie is perfect. Leave it alone. I don't want to see any quote unquote enhancements. I want it left alone. Okay, what are some other comments here? Oh, and you said, I would love to have seen a taping of the Jack Benny show. Oh, me too. Or what I would have loved to have done was sat in the audience when he used to do his radio show, in the 30s and 40s, long before television. And there was even a story there with Lucille Ball. See how I tie in Lucy here? She had just started doing her radio show, My Favorite Husband, in 1948, which, of course, was the forerunner of I Love Lucy. It was Jess Oppenheimer and Madeline Pugh and Bob Carroll Jr., the writers and the producer of that show, went on to do I Love Lucy. And Lucy, of course, was the star. And the radio show was done before a studio audience. And Jess felt there was just something missing. And this was at CBS Studios in Hollywood, where the Jack Benny show and some other shows were done down the hall. And he came to Lucy and gave her a couple of tickets to the Jack Benny show. And he said, I'm sending you to school and I want you to do some homework. Because he knew that the Jack Benny show, with Mary Livingston and Rochester and Dennis Day and all that, even though they were holding their scripts, they were acting out their show in front of the audience, interacting. And he wanted Lucy to see that. And Lucy came back after the show and she was all excited. I see why you sent me. I get it now. I get it. And Jess said from that moment on, the show was transformed. Lucy just fell in love with working in front of an audience, and the whole show came to life. Hence the reason 3 years later, when CBS wanted to turn that radio show into television, they wanted Lucy and Desi to come to New York to do it because they wanted to do the show live. And at the time, there were no facilities in Los Angeles to do such a show. And they wanted them to come to New York because they strongly felt that Lucy had to have a studio audience. They said, Lucy's no good without a studio audience. So they didn't want to move to New York. Hence the reason they created a way to film a show with 3 cameras, 35 millimeter film, in front of a studio audience. That had never been done before. They invented the process just because they didn't want to leave LA. They didn't want to leave their home. They wanted to have their family here in Los Angeles, but they had to find a way to have an audience. There were plenty of sound stages. They could have filmed the show. That wasn't the problem. They had to find an old sound stage. And I mean an old sound stage, because most movie companies said, no, you're not going to do this. They had to find an old soundstage on an old rundown lot that would let them cut a hole. They had to cut a hole in the back of the soundstage for the studio audience to enter. They had to install bleachers. They had to put cameras on dollies. A whole lighting system had to be invented just for this. And I've been on that soundstage. It still exists to this day. And it's on Romaine Street, 6600 block of Romaine Street in Hollywood. Anybody who lives in LA or ever gets here, you can see to this day, because they've sealed up the wall, but you can see the outline of the crack in the wall where the old studio entrance used to be. Okay, here, what are some other comments? I'm looking at the time here. I may have to go in just a little bit. I've got a lot of work to do tonight, but let's see. Where's some other comments? Oh, gosh. I'm way ahead of myself here. Yeah, Jim, you're talking about the all-star roster of writers on the Sid Caesar show. And yes, Jim, Alan Brady was mostly based on Sid Caesar. Maybe Carl Reiner was just being diplomatic because Sid Caesar was very much still alive and still relevant. He didn't want to insult him. Yeah, I've heard that Extreme Brands about, his alcoholism. And I know that Sid Caesar used to weigh a lot more. He had an eating addiction also. But he did give up drinking. He slimmed down. But, you're right. It wasn't the magic wasn't quite there in his performing. And yes, I have heard he became a gentler, quieter person after that. But it was also past his prime at that point. His day was in the 1950s. I don't think he ever quite reached that level of stardom ever again. And that might have been humbling to him. Oh, yeah, Jim, you're right about Madeline testing Lucy's stunts. Yeah, that is true. It fell to her, the girl, quote unquote, girl writer. They looked at her as expendable. I don't think that's quite the way of looking at it, but they also thought, well, it's better you get hurt instead of Lucy. Madeline had a sense of humor about it, thankfully. She was such a gracious lady. And oh yes, that was the episode where they were both hanging from the rope. I don't know, the cord, whatever you want to call it, from the helicopter. above, which wasn't really a helicopter, but they were implying that on the soundstage. Uh, well, extreme brands, yes, that's a very important point. I make that point to many people when I try to introduce them to I Love Lucy, which is fun. I once did that with a friend from Australia who had never seen an I Love Lucy episode in his life. And he came here to be an actor. He'd studied acting extensively. And I showed him the Vitamin Vegemin episode. And he was astounded as an actor, that by all the transitions she made. And he said, "You mean to tell me she did this in one take?" Because, most movie making, you cut, you have, many times you have your transitions, you have a chance to cut and prepare and move on to that. But that whole bit was done with 3 cameras, one long, continuous, uninterrupted take. And so everything Lucy did was just meticulously rehearsed and perfected. And then when she got out there, it just flowed out of her, and it is a masterpiece. But I always point out to people that Lucille Ball was originally a great dramatic actress, and she married that with her comedy. So when you watch Lucy do her things, like watch her take that taste of the Vitamin Vegemin, the way she responds is so honest. That's the actress. That bitter taste in her mouth, her reacting to that, but playing it bigger for comedy. And when I studied with Dee Wallace, she always told us, you play comedy exactly like you would play drama. Exactly. You play it with the same truth, the same conviction. But the difference is with comedy, the stakes are higher. And that's how Lucy played it. And Dee would even say, you want to watch the best whoever was at this, it was Lucille Ball. Watch Lucille Ball do comedy. There is never a false note from her. She played it for the truth. She played it for the reality. And Lucy herself once said, this was a Q&A she did at the Museum of Radio and Television in New York. She said, the secret to my character, I played her like a little girl. I played her like a little girl who just believed everything. Hence those outrageous situations. She, the actress, played it like a little girl who just believed it. And because she did that, she made us believe it. So that was the great secret of Lucy. And it was Orson Welles who, I know he later guest starred on I Love Lucy, but this was beforehand when I think they were both on the Ed Sullivan Show. And somebody saw Orson in the wings, just watching Lucy on stage. But I mean, watching her very, very seriously, taking her in. And the person said, what are you doing, Orson? And he said, I am watching the finest actress in the world. And he was serious, dead serious. I'm watching the finest actress in the world work. And he was just studying her, and he was just captivated. So let's see, there's some other comments here. I hate when I go down, this whole thing jumps up, and then I have to find my place again. Let me go back. Oh, I wish it wouldn't do this. Oh, gosh, it's jumped way down. Oh, well, Jim, I see your comment about the Lost in Space robot. I'm trying to see if there's anything before this. Yes, Jonathan Harris. Oh, the pain. Yeah, I hope I wasn't too derogatory in speaking of him. I meant him. I meant him. Let's see here. I'm trying not to let these comments jump again. But yes, as a little 6-year-old boy, I did have a meltdown in the yard over the Lost in Space robot. True story. Valerie, that does not compute. Yes, when Dr. Smith would insult the robot. Yeah, he and that robot had chemistry together. He really did. And those were some of the funniest parts of Lost in Space. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Kelly. Thank you for your comment about the color. Yeah. You see, this is what we love about the magic of the movies. That was even though it was all very technical, what they did, technically, it was technical, but it created magic. I love that. I'll never get over that. What was this with Extreme Brands when my dad saw Wizard of Oz that moment? He said it just took his breath away, like he was like 13 at the time. He bawled like a baby when she died. Yeah, Judy. Oh, yeah. I love Judy Garland. I love her very much. Her gravesite is 15 minutes, but depending on traffic, this is Los Angeles, but on a good day, about 15 minutes away. And I've gone by there several times. Just like to be in her energy. And one time I made a replica pair of ruby slippers, and I mean a really good replica pair, where I found the original diagram for how the sequins were laid out, the fish scale pattern, how the bows were made, the bugle beads, the rhinestones. This was years ago, but I must have spent like $120 on sequins and rhinestones alone. And then I tracked down a pair of 1938 pumps, size 6B, Judy Garland size, same style shoe. And then I proceeded to glue those sequins on one by one by one by one by one. It took me 3 weeks to do this, to make this pair, but they came out really well. I was under this idea that I was going to start this little business making ruby slippers and selling them on the side. And then after I finished that one pair, I said, there's no way in hell I am ever putting myself through this again. I'd lose my mind gluing those sequins down, but I still have the pair. But just for fun, I took the pair down to Judy Garland's grave. She's in a wall crypt. Technically, it's a crypt. She's interred there. And not to be morbid in any way, because I'm very, very respectful of people like Judy Garland. I love her. But I was told by a security guard that when people are put into those wall crypts, they're usually put in head first with the feet outward. And I thought, well, whatever is left of Judy's feet, and I say that with respect, I held the shoes up to the faceplate of her grave. And I thought, well, this is as close as I'm ever going to get to her. But this is my little way of making the shoes a little more authentic, because they've been next to Judy's feet. And I have them in my china cabinet, oddly enough, with my genie bottle that Barbara Eaton autographed to me. Yeah, that's something I did. Let's see, what are some other comments here? Kelly, I'm only 4'11". Used to tell people I was related to one of the Munchkins. That's funny. Well, Judy was only about 4'10", 4'11". Tiny, tiny little woman, but what a powerful, not just powerful voice, powerful presence, powerful talent. I'm of the opinion that Judy Garland was the single greatest talent to ever come out of Hollywood. And yeah, people will argue that one, but I said, look at her work. We know, of course, she could sing. That's a given. Sing better than anybody in the world, but she was an extraordinary dramatic actress. And more than that, she was a great comedian. Lucille Ball even said, next to Judy Garland, I'm a mortician. She's the funniest woman in Hollywood. And also, Judy could dance. Splendid dancer. This is a woman who danced with Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly and held her own. I can't think of any performer who encompassed all that and did it as well as she did. Now, someone present day comes to mind as Barbara Streisand. She comes very close and is brilliant in her own right. But even Barbara Streisand graciously said, when Howard Stern was interviewing her for her autobiography, and he was asking her questions about the time she did the Judy Garland show. And he was saying, well, what was it like singing with your peer? And Barbara was very gracious. She said, oh, no, Judy's was a much better singer than me, much better than me. In fact, according to Barbara, she said Judy was probably the greatest singer ever lived. And Howard said, don't you consider yourself one of the greatest singers who ever lived? And Barbara, being modest, said, I'm very good, but no, I won't call myself the greatest singer who lived. It's Judy. Anyway, there's some other things here before I go, because I'm looking at the time. Yeah, My Favorite Husband. I'm assuming, Jim, you're referring to My Favorite Husband is definitely the forerunner of I Love Lucy. Very much so. The only big difference, the big difference was, of course, in the My Favorite Husband, they had a very white bread wasp husband. That's why CBS had such a fit when Lucy wanted to use her real life husband to have this Cuban band leader. That was so unheard of the day. In fact, CBS was so against the idea that Lucy and Desi created an act and went on the road and toured major cities around the country, and the audiences adored them. The reviews were raves, and they came back to CBS and said, America's ready to accept us. And CBS had to agree for that reason. But that was the biggest difference between the radio show. And also the radio show, the couple on there, not really Fred and Ethel, because they were different characters, but they did have a husband and wife, best friend couple on there. And it was Gail Gordon and Bea Benaderet. And Lucy very much wanted them to play Fred and Ethel on the TV show, but Bea Benaderet was committed already to the Burns and Allen show. And let's see, Gail Gordon was committed to Our Miss Brooks. So that's why they couldn't do the show. But Lucy and Gail Gordon had an amazing partnership. Gail Gordon is the one actor who appeared on every single broadcast show Lucille Ball ever did. And I mean every one, because I'm counting radio. He worked with her in 1938 on a show called The Wonder Show that Jack Haley, who played the Tin Man, hosted. They worked together all the way back to 1938. They did My Favorite Husband together, that radio show. He guested on he guested 3 times on I Love Lucy, 2 times Mr. Atterbury, Ricky's boss, and then he did one of the hour-long episodes. And then, of course, we know about the Lucy show. Here's Lucy. And then finally her last series, Life with Lucy. Gail Gordon was on every single show she ever did. I think that's amazing. They had a partnership that lasted 48 years off and on. Let's see, what are some other comments here? Ward, we were just talking about you, how it's lonely here without you. Hey, thank you for joining. I mean, it's 6:47. I've got to go in a few minutes here, but Ward, thank you. It's really good to have you here. Guess where you are, Ward? I don't know. Where are you? Where are you? Tell us. You're at Niagara Falls, Ward. Great. Love the geysers and glaciers, Bermuda Triangle, Puffins. Where? Okay, I'm reading through comments here. I'm really behind here, and I've got to get off in a few minutes here. So, Ward, you were at Niagara Falls? Oh, you said no, but I did see some waterfalls there. Okay, I'm reading through the comments myself to see where you were. Okay, it was a land of falls and of geysers and glaciers. Inch by inch, step by step, no make trees. That's great. Yellowstone? No, apparently it was not that. Weird Lone Valley. Oh, yeah, you were in Iceland. You were in Iceland? That's great, Ward. Oh my gosh, I wish we had time to talk about it. Maybe next week. One of the reasons I have to sign off, I mentioned I've got a lot of work to do to get ready for Dr. Whimsy show tomorrow because we're doing an author interview and I've got to finish reading the book. But my other reason is out of respect to my dear friend Anastasia, who does her live stream at 7. And I always like to get off the stage so I don't steal thunder from her. And I know a lot of you are gracious to go over to her show, and I don't want to interfere with that. What was this word? But Miss Garland also was very strong. Ever see her pull up Mickey Rooney onto a table while dancing with one hand? Well, actually, that was a special effect. I think that was Mickey helping jump up a little and made it look like he was pulling her, but maybe she was strong. They really worked beautifully together. I think they were one of the greatest teamings ever. When you talk about chemistry and exchange of energy and just the joy they gave. But anyway, I see my comments have run out here for the moment. This might be a good cue to step off the stage right now, as it is 6:49. I'm going to say goodbye for right now. I did want to give a plug to my friend Pam of Pomona Remembers. I know I mentioned at the beginning of the show. I want to say it again, that she has a new video where she channeled Ozzy Osbourne. And she's very gifted at what she does. I think you may find it interesting. And I used to talk with his wife, Sharon, a lot here in LA. Very, very sweet woman. I always assumed that I only saw Ozzy in person once, where he and Sharon, oddly enough, were waiting by an escalator and a parking deck near the Hollywood Bowl, and I didn't intrude on them. But I always figured he had to be a good man to be married to a woman like her, and she was with him for decades. And Sharon was a smart woman. She did not take BS from people, but a really good, gentle, sweet soul. And interestingly enough, she told me her favorite, this ties in perfectly, she told me her favorite movie of all time is The Wizard of Oz. So maybe that's a good way to take this full circle here. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining me. I'm going to be on the Oracle of Whimsy tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and also same time, same place on Thursdays. Tomorrow I mentioned the author interview we are doing, and somebody's giving me some hearts. Thank you very, very much. That means a lot. That's very sweet. I'm going to sign out for now. Gosh, time has flown. It's been almost 2 hours. I said I was going to do a short show today. Never seems to work out that way, does it? Be here next week. I promise you. Try my best to be on time. And I'm going to sign out for now. Thank you very much. Goodbye.